Well, hello and welcome to the Impactus podcast. My name is Jordan and I'm joined by my friend Andrew here. And today we're talking about being young and married, something both of us have some experience in. We're going to be talking about why are young men getting married later in life. We're going to talk about what we wish we knew when we got married and just hopefully we can help you guys avoid some of the mistakes that we made. And so stay with us and we're going to jump right in. Well, hey guys, I'm so excited to have my friend Andrew here today. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but man, he understands what we're talking about today. He is a leader. He's led many youth and young adults, and I know you have a special place in your heart too for young men. And so tell us a little bit about your background and just kind of how you ended up here today.
Yeah, I appreciate being here with you. This is really, really fun and really cool. I grew up in Mississauga, which is just outside Toronto, for those of you who don't know your GTA geography. Went to public school, grew up with an older brother, younger sister. Parents were church-going people, so we started going to church from a young age and kept going to church from a young age. I got really connected to the youth program at my church, which I love youth ministries because it had a huge impact on me and my life. And in my time in youth ministry as a student, we'd go to conferences and stuff like that. And from a pretty early age, like theology and Jesus and faith was interesting to me in the kind of way that I felt like maybe I have some sort of calling to ministry or to be a pastor in some way and in some sense. And those who were leaders of mine at the time kind of called that out in me too. So it led me down a path of going to school a few different places in my early 20s and serving in a few different roles and capacities at our home church here in Mississauga. And then it led me to go to seminary. And it also led me to take students on international trips to conferences where I got a chance to meet my wife at a youth conference. And so for those of you who have single pastors or youth pastors in your ministry, they're not taking your students to youth conferences for your students' sake. They're taking them because they have eyes on a prize that they're looking for. And that was my experience. So I met my wife while we were at a youth conference in Indiana as a youth pastor with a group of students there. And I slipped into her DMs. For those who don't know what that means, it means I reached out to her on the internet and started talking to her there. And we started a relationship, and it grew to a point where she accepted my offer to marry me.
And you have some children?
So yeah, we got married in 2016, in May of 2016 in Indiana. Actually, no, March of 2016. We moved to Canada, back to Canada Church Plant in May of 2016. And since then, we've been in different kind of roles at our church, different pastoral roles, and we have had 2 children since. Cool. I've got almost 3-year-old and an almost 1-year-old, both girls, and they are verifiably the cutest children in the world.
That is up for debate.
I don't think it's up for debate.
My daughter is the cutest. Well,
Poppy's cute, but
Poppy's pretty cute. Well, listen, you're one of the few guys that made it through Christian University without getting married. We went to the same Christian university, Tyndale University. Some say Bible college, others say bridal college, that type of thing. You see a lot of relationships begin. Yeah, you see a lot end. But a lot of people do find a partner in Bible college. But what's interesting is that people are actually getting married later in life. And this is no shock to many of you that are listening, I'm sure. But in 1971, the average age of a man that got married was 24. In 2008, it's 31. I imagine now in 2021, it's even higher than that. Andrew, from your perspective, as someone who have led young men, what do you think some of this is going on?
I think something's happening culturally. I don't think it's. I don't think there's just a few guys who are choosing to get married later. I don't think it is just people freely choosing that that's a better path. I actually think there's something happening culturally. I feel like even in Christian culture and even amongst people who get married young. How old were you when you got married?
Oh man, I should have thought about this before the podcast. At 24.
Okay, so you were relatively young comparatively, but people like you and I was 24. My wife was 26 when we got married. We're considered getting married young, even though we freely chose to do it. It didn't seem young to me. It didn't. I don't know if it seemed young to you.
No, it's funny. Rachel and I, we dated for 4 years before getting engaged, and what's funny is our Christian friends were going, Jordan, like, is everything okay with you guys? Like, are you guys okay? It's taken a while to put a ring on that. Our non-Christian friends, when we got engaged, were like, whoa, guys, slow down. Like, aren't you going to, like, establish yourselves, get your careers, buy a house? And so there is a bit of a dichotomy in some ways between what, like, the church and the world think.
Yeah, totally. And we're trying to figure out, we're navigating our way through it. Like, are we young? Is this wrong? Should I have waited till I was older? And then you see young adults get married at like 20, and you're like, whoa, that's really young and weird. But that's how old my parents were when they got married. It wasn't weird then. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were talking about a couple of pastor kids that I'm connected to, children of pastors who are getting married at like 21, 22. And they were thinking like, this is really bad. This is a Christian person who was like, oh, it's a really bad example that these kids are getting married so young. They're just getting married to have sex. That's such a bad way to think about it. Such a wrong way to think about it. It's such a weird thing, right? And this is a Christian person, a deeply Christian person. I'm like, maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. I know there's stories, and none of them who got married are getting married for that purpose alone. But there's almost this perception now that people who get married young are usually religious, and they're getting married for one reason. Yeah. And that's because they're not supposed to have sex. So they want to have sex, so they go and get married. Which
not my experience.
Not my experience. And I don't think it's their experience, but that's the perception. And if that's not the reason why, then it's like, then don't get married so young. Do all these other things. So
it's interesting. I think you're right. I think it's like we're living in a cultural moment that, you're seeing the secularization of society. We live in post-Christian society. And so in regards to the godly ordinance of marriage, we shouldn't be shocked that culture as a whole is getting married later. I mean, so, you think about like, I'm a wedding officiant, and so are you. We both do weddings.
AndrewWoodWeddings.com.
Well, what's interesting is almost every non-Christian wedding I've had the privilege of walking alongside a couple with, all of them said, well, we had two choices. We could buy a house or we could have a wedding.
Yeah.
And all you millennials that live in the Toronto area, you kind of
know what that feels like.
You know what it feels like to say, wow, I'll never get into the housing market. And so you're seeing some of that. I also think, too, like, I'd like to know your thoughts on this. I saw an article years ago. I couldn't find it in preparation for this. But it was the idea, it might not even have been an article, but it was this statement that so many millennials are hesitant to get married because maybe they were the children of this mass divorce culture that we've seen. Maybe millennials don't want to get married because they don't see the marriages they've seen as something they want.
Yeah.
Any thoughts around that?
Yeah. I get, like, I don't blame them. We were talking about this before, like, there's half of them, and we throw out these marriage stats and these divorce stats all the time. They're kind of I think they're overused a little bit, but the reality is, like, there's, a lot of people who get divorced, and so that's its own pain that people experience. And there's the odd person you talk to that will tell you that it didn't affect them that much, but most of the time, if people are honest, it has a huge impact on them, especially if it happened during formative years in their childhood. And so that has a massive impact on them. And then the ones who don't end up getting divorced, there's still so many unhealthy marriages. Like, how hard marriage is. And so there's lots of people who are living in marriages and are committed to them, but they're not that healthy. So people's example are divorce or really unhealthy marriage. How many examples of really healthy, stable relationships can you even point to, or in general population point to? It's hard to. It's not the norm, right? It's not common. So I don't blame people for having that fear. I don't blame people for having those feelings.
Especially if they don't have that underlying ethic
Yeah.
of why marriage is worth it, why marriage we believe is honoring, why marriage is a gift. I do think that this should be a reminder to us as Christians and parents of modeling something special for our children, of that marriage can be something beautiful, can be something shaping. At the same time, I think in the church, we have to learn how to treat singles. Yeah. And that's a whole episode in of itself. But just the idea that that singleness is okay, and singleness can be honoring, and singleness can be beautiful, and singleness can be a gift. You see, like in Proverbs where it says, like, a man who finds a wife finds a good thing.
Right.
You also see Paul say things like along the lines of, I wish everyone were like me, single.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just think the church needs to do both. I think sometimes we make married with kids like the ideal. Well, we even see it. We were chatting a little bit about this before, how we've seen in some church planting groups, what they're looking for as a particular church planter is a married man with kids.
With multiple kids, yeah.
With multiple kids.
Because that's a sign of health. That means, okay, there's nothing wrong with this person because they're married with multiple kids.
Yeah, that makes me scratch my head a little bit, right? Yeah. When, if we look at our, like the Catholic Church, they look for the complete opposite, someone that is going to be completely dedicated to.
Isn't that so interesting?
That's very interesting. I think on the road to truth, there's a ditch on either side, right? And I think somewhere in the middle there, you're going to find the truth on that one. But we have to be able to celebrate both. Obviously the family is so important. And that's one of the reasons why people should get married. There are good reasons to get married.
There are very good reasons to get married. And this is actually, like, this isn't Christian. It's not only Christians who think this. I was talking to my somebody who's in my family who is not like a religious person by any means. They don't model a religious looking life in any kind of way. And we were having a conversation about family and about offspring, and they just became a grandparent recently. And they're verbalizing all these things are so true about the human experience, which is that family is so meaningful and so important and provides so much stability and so much like of everything that you need in your life. Stable family is worth everything to this person. Like their ethic of staying married, you know, I think is a Jesus ethic that they probably have culturally, but their verbalized ethic was, it's what's best for my kids. It's what's best for my grandkids. I'm going to continue to stay married for the sake of this family unit. So there still is a strong ethic for family, or at least we feel it. And when you talk to like the average person who's not super woke or is trying to like say something that they don't actually believe, or it's not trying to like push some sort of ideological talking point. If you're just talking to a normal person who's living every single day, just working and trying to survive, they'll tell you that the most important thing is family. And they'll value it. It's a high value because it does bring so much meaning to people.
Yeah, I think you're on. I think that is a good reason to be married, is the security that a monogamous household has for children and even society as a greater whole.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's good for us to have a caveat here that we have tons of single men listeners, and the temptation sometimes when we jump into these conversations, intentionally or unintentionally, is for people to feel as though like, well, this is exactly the same thing that we communicate to people in the church, that the ideal is marriage and everything else is subpar. And just know our hearts as Impactus, that's not how we feel. You know, we believe that you can be single and thrive as a Christian.
As married people, I don't know about you, as married people, I have 100 ideas of things I could do.
Yeah.
If I wasn't married and I didn't have kids, and like not like the kinds of things you'd think I'd want to do. Like honestly, good things. Like good things to serve the Lord and build the kingdom. I've got a massive list, and it's not that my marriage and my family holds me back from it. It's that I have a specific and unique calling because I have a family, and there's certain things I can't go and do, and I can't serve in certain ways, and those are barriers, those are boundaries put on me, and it's an okay thing. Yeah. And there's different types of barriers and boundaries if you're single, but it's not one's not more valuable than the other to the kingdom work that we're called to.
Let's be honest, man. There's tons of families, tons of single dads that are leading in ways that are better than dads that are in marriages and relationships. And so a good reason to get married, though, you're right, is to build a family if that's what you feel God calling you to. And I think that's one thing that doesn't get stated enough, that marriage is something that you should feel God pushing you to. So oftentimes people are pressured into marriage, or they have that person in the church that plays matchmaker, right? I hate to admit, I've been known to play matchmaker.
You don't hate to admit that. You love to admit that.
Okay, I'm just going to say, Matt and Beth, Sean and Emma, Caleb, no, I'm just kidding. But I think there is sometimes people like to push this, like, well, you're going to get married, or that's the question they often ask, And so I just think we've got to navigate that conversation carefully, but also it's something that you should be called to and you shouldn't be pressured into. Now there's tons of bad reasons to get married. And
lots of bad reasons to get married. And it doesn't mean you can't figure out how to be married even if you entered into it for a bad reason.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I'm sure
you have to actually. Yeah. If you got married and you are married and your motivation was you're just like some thirsty 20-year-old, you know what I mean? And you're just like,
it's better to marry and burn with passion.
Right. If that's really like, we don't necessarily promote that ethic, but if you're married because of that ethic, you're still responsible to stay married, right?
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, there are healthier reasons to get married and less healthy reasons to get married.
Yeah, I think of like the myth or the mistake people make when they think like, oh, I have like sexual addiction, and if I get a partner, I will no longer like watch porn, or I'll no longer masturbate, or whatever the case may be. I have yet to see marriage fix sexual issues. I have only seen marriage magnify.
Exacerbate it.
In fact, we have a contributor named Sathya Sam, and he does a lot of stuff on this, but how marriage magnifies a lot of these issues rather than kind of fix them. I think too, like a bad reason to get married is because you feel like someone's going to complete you. Yeah. That type of language kind of sometimes just is like a red flag. Yeah. Like the idea of like finding the one. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I don't know. Did you find the one?
Oh, that's a good question. I believe I found Rachel, and she is the one.
And she's one.
She's my only one. Yeah. And she's the one that I will commit to.
Is she your person though?
The person.
Or is she your person?
I don't like the language around person.
I can let you guys in on something. My wife and I have a guilty pleasure.
Uh-oh.
This is something I do to serve her and celebrate her essence, because Stephen Arterburn in Every Man's Marriage told me celebrate her essence. Okay. And part of her essence is to watch every season of The Bachelor and Bachelorette.
Oh, man.
That comes out.
Bachelor and Bachelorette.
Nowadays, it feels like there's never not a season on of The Bachelor or Bachelorette
it's
franchise.
Always on.
There's Canadian ones, there's American ones, there's girls, there's guys. It's nonstop. But one of my biggest pet peeves with the show is that it seems like everybody now uses this language of my person. I'm looking for my person or the person. And it's kind of like bringing up that kind of old school language of I'm seeking the one and I'm looking for my soulmate and my one true love. It's that fairy tale Disney. There's one out there for you and it's the perfect one, and do everything you have to do to find it and give up that's what the whole Bachelor thing is. You give up your life and your job and you move to this mansion with 30 other people in hopes that you find the one. And I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, not a big on it. I think it puts a lot of pressure on people to say, like you've got to search the world. There's a lot of people in the world. And especially now that you have a lot of eligible bachelorettes on your phone with dating apps. Like, I don't even know how people navigate that very well. But it also just the whole idea of it actually comes from Greek mythology, from when Plato wrote his Symposium and how they believed that humans were, had two faces and four arms and two heads, and Zeus was like, these people are too powerful. I'm going to slice them down the middle. And now you have to go your whole life trying to find your other half. We even still use that language, half, right? Yeah. And so I think we just got to be careful around that. I think it puts a pressure on people, but I also think it gives the illusion that you're not complete without that person.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a relationship of people that haven't, when you have that idea, you put a load on your partner that they just can't carry.
I am a big guy and I cannot carry that load.
Honestly,
I'm horrible. I fail at it all the time. I cannot sufficiently carry that load for somebody else.
Yeah. And so the question, I guess, Andrew, is how do you find a partner? How do you find a wife? To a young guy that's maybe listening and you're looking and you're trying the dating things, it's easy for us to say we're married, and so
I know somebody chose to marry. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
Honestly, that's part of it though. Because the whole mentality of finding the one or what are you looking for, or I used to tell young guys, I still tell them, I think this is useful. I still tell them hey, forget about what you're looking for and focus on becoming the person that the person you're looking for is going to be looking for. That's the one thing you have control over, and you don't want to miss that, because Rachel could come around, and if you're not that great yet, Jordan, then she's going to walk on by you kind of thing.
It's amazing. She stopped for a second.
Yeah, right. So I still use that language, and I think it's useful. It puts responsibility back on you. But the whole idea of fine-tuning everything so perfectly, looking for that perfect person to fit this box, it's just, you're never going to find the person to do that. So you're either going to lie to yourself about them actually meeting those expectations, or you're going to constantly look and be disappointed because nobody's meant to meet that need or to fit so perfectly. But the other side of the coin is there are things that are responsible to look for, right?
Definitely. I think, I think about this just came to me when I moved to Toronto, the Toronto area, Milton, which you also live. Shout out to Milton. Although I just moved to Burlington, so I don't know if I can say that anymore. But when I moved to Milton, I found a basement apartment that I loved. It was awesome. But then for the next 3 years, every night before I would go to bed, I would get on my phone and look at apartments in Milton. And I think it was just this questioning of, did I make the right choice? Is there a better deal out there? And I think sometimes, especially with dating apps and things like that, that we have to be, there's this unsure, maybe I'll just do a few more swipes, or I'll just look a little bit more, or I'll start conversations with others. So I think it can be very paralyzing. It's kind of like going to a buffet and saying, what am I going to have?
Right.
Whereas we went to Christian universities or small circles of Christian community. And it was okay, I don't have the world at my fingertips. Right. But I say that to say, I do think there are responsible things to do. The first is obviously and not to be trite, but to make it a matter of prayer, right? Is an obvious one. And I think too, inviting your community into that, not just even finding, but just making sure it's the right one. Say you've started dating someone and your friends are saying, man, red flag. If it's friends you trust and love, pay attention to that. Sometimes it's hard to hear through your own feelings when you're infatuated. But if people you love are saying, hey, Jordan, I'm not sure about this, or maybe welcoming them into the conversation, I think that's important too. Yeah, I think about Abraham and how he wanted for his son Isaac a wife. So he sends his servant out to find, and the servant goes out, and the servant prays that if a girl comes by and serves him in his camel water, that'll be the wife for Isaac. And I think God does still sometimes move in that way. However, I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure and we kind of spiritualize, like, God, send me the one. Yeah. And so do I believe that, God can, like, make it evident who your wife is? I mean, the night I got home from my first date with Rachel, I was high-fiving guys in the hallway, being like, and I was shouting, I'm going to marry that girl, right? I was saying, it was amazing.
Those are my favorite stories, by the way.
But you know what's funny? Rachel got back to her house and didn't say the same thing at all. Yeah. And so here I was having Abraham,
naturally,
having an Isaac and Rebecca story.
Right.
She's on the other hand saying, I've got to suss this guy out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And both are to be expected.
Right.
And so don't freak out if it feels like the stars aren't aligning right away. But also, don't be close to the idea that God could do something miraculous either.
Yeah.
Now listen, we've both been married 5 years.
5 years.
5 years, 2016.
Going on 6, baby.
Wow. When's your anniversary?
March 11th.
Wow. That was close slip, man.
Yeah. March 11th.
It was funny. I was telling people for years my wedding date was June 6th. It's June 18th.
Oh.
Yeah. So
that's a little off.
It's a little off. But what would you say to a young Andrew, newly married or just about to get married? What would you say?
I would, man, I am just learning how to talk in feelings.
Wow.
And I know that I don't even say that lightly. I am 30 years old. I've been a on and off kind of youth leader pastor for 12 years. I was a pastor of an adult church for 2 years. I've been to seminary, been married for almost 6 years, and I have 2 children. And I am just like infancy stage of speaking through feelings, like my feelings. And this is just something I never learned growing up. Like it wasn't withheld from me. I had a really pretty healthy upbringing, a pretty healthy family, a lot of love there. Parents are still together. We're really close, all of our family. So it wasn't like I necessarily had trauma growing up in my life. I know a lot of people do have different stories, and it makes more sense why some of these things would be challenges for them. For me, we just never learned how to do that. It was never talked about. It's just in the culture that I grew up in, especially playing sports, all growing up, like thinking through the feelings is one thing, and then speaking those feelings and the vulnerability that requires is its own thing. And I don't do either very well. Even when it comes to thinking, like the way my mind works is not usually feelings, or I'm at least not attuned to them.
Sure.
And so I wish, like when I was earlier on, instead of reading all the marriage books about like women submit to your husbands and men, you're the leader. And this is how marriage, Christian sex is supposed to look like. Do this and don't do that. And all these practical things. And this is conflict resolution. Like all that was really useful in some ways. But what I didn't have was an embodied experience of talking through the filter of feelings in the midst of conflict.
Wow.
Right. And so I'm just learning how to do that. The example is like, if my wife and I are having a conflict, having a fight about something, like I'm really, really good at pointing out what she did that was wrong.
The behavior.
Really good at it. Yeah. And I listen to a lot of psychology and read it so I could tell her what's going on in her. Right. This is what's going on, and you're doing dangerous. This and you're doing that, and this is why you're doing it. And I might be right.
Yeah.
What I'm not doing is communicating why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. Right. Like I'm enraged, or I'm angry, I'm upset, or I'm hurt here, and I'm not thinking about why. All I'm doing is attributing it to a behavior that was done to me. And it doesn't mean that didn't happen, and it doesn't mean that was right. But what I'm just starting to learn to do is to think about what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way. Like if I'm feeling angry or defensive, or like if I'm feeling condescended and I'm feeling ashamed about that, or I'm feeling weak, or I'm feeling, you know what I mean? And that's what I'm reacting out of. I'm learning to, and I wish I learned to do this earlier, how to respond with, hey, like this is how I'm feeling right now. I don't know why I'm feeling that way all the time. Yeah. And I can explore that, but learning how to explore why I'm feeling that way. Like if I'm feeling ashamed, why am I feeling ashamed? Like my wife just asked me to pick something up off the floor, you know? Like if my wife says, hey, you forgot to get that thing I asked you to get again, instead of like, I'm feeling defensive, I'm feeling angry, but there's an emotion there.
Yeah.
And then part of it that I haven't ever really spent a lot of time exploring that I'm just learning to now is I'm feeling ashamed. Like, oh man, like you're pathetic. Why didn't you do that right?
Yeah.
Why didn't you get to that? Why did you forget that again? Why are you so useless? Why do you keep screwing that up? Why do you keep getting that wrong? Why are you not better? Why are you lazy? Like those are real thoughts and feelings that are happening in me. And they're happening like that. Yeah. I don't know if you experience that, but they happen like that. And if you're not processing them or paying close attention to them and working through those things in the moment, then what you end up doing is just fighting against behavior all the time. And it just exacerbates the conflict, you know?
Yeah. And so what I hear you're saying, Andrew, is you wish you had learned to like be able to kind of interrupt that process and just pause for a moment, or even over time reflect on, why do I have a particular issue in when she comments on, you know, why I do things. It's like the shame and justice. It's like, well, she's right, but I also still am very offended.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then, why do I feel that way about myself?
Yeah.
Is there something else going on there that isn't just related to the behavior? And I honestly didn't. It's taken me years to figure that out, and I haven't figured it out yet. It's taken me years to figure out that I need to figure it out.
It's one of those things you even figure out more as you say it out loud.
Yeah, well, because no one's talking, you know. Maybe people are talking about it. They just haven't in the circles that I've been around, you know, necessarily. So,
yeah, and I've heard that shame actually has two results. Oftentimes it becomes in like navel gazing, right? So as men, like when we feel challenged, oh, poor me, I never do anything right. And the other is like extra over the top action.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, well, now I'm going to do everything right. I'm going to clean the kitchen every morning. And like the other day, I just said to my wife, as I was kind of feeling a little bit of shame about how my wife cooks some meals and I'm home after work, and and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start getting up in the mornings and I'm going to put a slow cooker on every morning. And I just said that to my wife. I'm thinking about doing this. But what was that? It was overreaction because of shame. So you see this a lot when things happen in the world, injustice. You know, you see people say, oh, I can't believe I missed this, or why am I so bad? And the other extreme is I'm going to respond immediately and do a lot of action.
Fix it all right away.
Fix it all.
What is some advice that you wish you had when you were not yet married?
Yeah, I think I underestimate. I was focusing on the wrong threats to marriage. You know, as a young man, I'm like, okay, I need to stay away from like, obviously like the big things like affairs, blow up arguments, you know, like pornography. They're all really big things. And all those things are things we need to be very careful of not to allow into our marriage. At the same time, I think those are often, those are manifestations of things that are not dealt with.
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali, who is the best boxer other than Jake Paul, just kidding, said that it's not the mountain ahead of it's not the climb of the mountain that'll kind of wear you out. It's the pebble that's in your shoe. And I just feel like when I heard that, I thought about marriage because I just thought about how easy it is for like the slow day-to-day erosion of either connectedness or miscommunication. It's the day-to-day efforts of keeping just intimacy alive in your marriage that will protect you from those greater things. I think about like just our generation and how they numb out at the end of every day on their phones. And, you know, Rachel and I are trying to get better at that, or how easy it is after putting Poppy to bed just to turn on Netflix and then we don't speak until the next morning, basically till we slide into bed, say goodnight and wake up. And so that's something I wish I had been more weary of early on. I think another thing is just the idea that my wife, Rachel, is not responsible for me.
Yeah, that's so big, eh?
You know, like I was reading a book recently called The Great Sex Rescue. Or no, I was listening to a podcast by the authors of that book. And they were talking about how like you want to be unromantic to your wife, be a giant kid in a man's body. Right. You know, like if you want to just be like a teenager around the house. And I think maybe unconsciously, I can't believe I'm about to say this on air, but my wife may hear. I think subconsciously I probably expected my wife just to do what my mom did, and which was pick up after me. And I think a lot of young men, that's a challenge they have, is that they expect their wife to mother them. Yeah. And I just put that to bed really early and still actively try and put that to bed. That actually my wife is not responsible for my bad habits. My wife is not responsible for my spiritual growth. That's a huge one. You know, as I try and love and lead in my family, like I want to be the one setting the pace on those things.
I thought that too. Like I thought going into marriage, I had terrible eating habits and spending habits, right? And am I the only one here? but I honestly thought, I'm like, oh, well, my wife's disciplined in these areas. So when we get married, she'll control our finances, and that'll fix the problem. And she won't want to eat all the garbage food that I always want to eat.
It doesn't
and
matter.
she won't put up with me going through the drive-through at McDonald's. She'll tell me off and correct me, and I'll feel bad about it. I won't do it again. And that'll fix the problem. Yeah. Treating my wife like she was going to be the discipline that I didn't have in my life, right? It's like, no, that's actually not how it works. Yeah. One, typically you bring somebody down a lot easier than they bring you up.
That's
which
so true.
I think I've been a worse influence on her than she's been a positive influence on me in respect to those areas. Yeah. Because, I'm a heavy guy to pull up, you know what I mean? So that's a reality. And the burden of it, like it's so, nobody wants to spend their life. We struggle with being disciplined with ourselves, like let alone having to take care of someone else. When you have kids, it's like, gosh, it's exhausting to have to walk around, pick up after your kid and be disciplined on their behalf. Can you imagine doing that for a grown adult?
Yeah, no, it's no fun. I remember one of the times when Rachel just so funnily sent me just a picture of a piece of gum that I had just kind of like somehow missed the garbage can, right? And I just thought,
did you know you, like when you threw it, did you know, honestly, like, can you recall back, you knew you missed it and you just walked on?
I don't know. I don't
remember. You remember if you actually knew? Okay. You've done that before, right? We've done that. We're like, nah.
Or they kick the little crumb under the fridge.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I hope we never look under there. But yeah, no, I think that was a big one. And just the whole idea, you don't get a new you when you get married. You touched on that. That's just so huge. Man, we're coming to the end of the podcast, and I would love to just maybe ask a speed round of questions, and just for you to answer quickly. And maybe I'll even give my answers. But what's the worst advice someone gave you about marriage?
I remember going to it was called Act Like Men conference. I don't know if you knew about it. It was back in the day when like the Mark Driscoll and the James McDonald crew were doing, these men's conferences. And I remember going with a bunch of men. It was in Hamilton. And at the time I thought, this is great. And one of the guys got up there. I think it may have been Mark, but one of them got up there and they talked about how Paul uses Eve's failing as an example of the fact that women are more easily deceived, and therefore they need a husband to help them not be so easily deceived. My role is to lead her so that she's not easily deceived. And I don't know if this is what they were trying to do, but how it came across to me was that in most situations, I'm the one who's going to see things more clearly. And my wife's not. And my job in leading her is to help her be more perceptive, right? To help her be more rational, to be less likely deceived. And this was terrible advice for me. First of all, I'm already the personality type that doesn't need to be told, you're probably right. Yeah. And second of all, that's just not true about women at all. And most of the time, my wife's seeing things clearer than I am. Oh. She's a very perceptive person, and she's aware of what's going on socially in ways that I'm not. She's paying attention. She's assessing risk. She's the one who's doing that. I'm the one who's just like abandon, any thinking and just go forward and do something. I'm the one who more easily can be manipulated and deceived into something. She's not that way at all. So first it hurt my perception of my wife, and then it also hurt us in conflict, right? Because there's so many conflicts where we can't resolve this conflict because I'm sitting here thinking she's the woman, so she's deceived, right? Or more easily deceived, so she's deceived by herself and whatever. And it's one is bad. One is not true. Yeah. So it's bad. Two, it's really harmful for seeing anybody that way, let alone your wife. But this was a teaching, a core teaching in the church or in the movement that I trusted, and that kind of I wore havoc. Going into marriage, thinking and that was still breaking.
That was definitely a piece of advice. I think of just even the common thing, and this may be a bit controversial because it does come from scripture, but the whole idea of like not going to bed angry, right? Don't let the sun go down on your anger. And I've had to wrestle with that because some of our greatest hurt, I think, and hurt in my friends' marriages and even in my own, is because I wouldn't let things go at 1 a.m. in the morning when we just need to go to bed. You know, like that, I don't know. Have you heard that before? Don't go to bed angry at one another and those types of things. Like,
yeah, I'm the one who's like, no, I need to go to bed angry because I'm not going to be able to deal with
and
this.
And how often do you wake up and sometimes you flipped the script? Like they're going, I see your perspective. And the other person wakes up and goes, I see your perspective.
Yeah.
And so like I've had to do some wrestling around that, and what does that mean for us as a couple? Because I always felt like everything had to be resolved so we can roll over and kiss goodnight. When really that's not how practically it works out. That's been one. Another quick question for you is, what is one small habit that if you implemented would make the greatest difference in your marriage? One habit.
One habit. I think if I this is not a small habit. This is once a week taking an actual intentional Sabbath. Yeah. Where, and by Sabbath, we mean like actually put up my phone away and be fully present and be intentional about it, not casual about it. If I just had one Sabbath, I think if we just had one Sabbath together as a week, as a family, my wife and I would feel way more connected. I would talk to her a lot more. I would ask her good questions, and we would have great conversations, and we'd feel connected. I would feel present with my family and my kids, which would relieve a lot of frustration in our marriage, her perception of me. I would feel a lot better about myself. My stress levels would be relieved. And yeah, usually that would result in, a date night or at least enjoying one another's company. So for me, it would be, if I just was intentional about taking a Sabbath and intentional about what I did on that day, not everything, it's not a fix everything, but it would make a huge difference in our marriage. Yeah.
I think for us, and mainly for me, because it's a me thing, is just the device, man, the phone. I think the jury is still out on how our devices are bringing division in our marriages, and just not from anything they may cause in and of themselves, is my lack of willingness to just put it down and turn it off. I was inspired recently of a pastor that said he turns it off every day at 5 p.m. when he kind of goes home, and I'm thinking, wow, what reality does he live in, right? But that would be the biggest thing for me. Andrew, this has been a pleasure and honor as we've walked through this. And I just want to take a moment just to speak to you, man, that might be watching at home or listening as you drive your car. I just want to encourage you that here at Impactus, our hope is to equip you for a life of purpose and godly impact. And all over our website and our resources, you can find stuff that can help you walk in that, whether it's marriage, pornography, sex addiction, also we've got articles on there on fitness. There's all sorts of stuff that can help you. But I do want to bring your attention to something that we're calling the Husband Challenge, 7 days. And it begins the week before Valentine's. And our hope is that, actually, by the time this is posted, it'll be just about starting. And so I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, sign up for that. It's 7 days long with a daily devotional and a challenge and a conversation prompt to help in your marriage. And we truly believe that it'll be encouraging to you. And so we want to encourage you to jump on over there and let us know what you thought. I would love to hear the worst piece of advice someone gave you about marriage before you got married. And so if you're watching on social media, feel free to hit that in the comments, or if you're on YouTube, write it in the comments. But don't hesitate to reach out, and we just pray you're blessed and have an awesome week. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Impactus podcast. To learn more about living a life of purpose and godly impact, check out impactus.org.